Well, good morning, and hey, we're still taking offering, but that's okay. Maybe you can listen and put your money in at the same time. I love it. So, hey, I'm glad that you guys are here. Thanks for being here. And this morning's service is going to be probably just a little bit different than our typical service, but nothing too terrible. Just going to spend some time talking to you guys. I know we say that every week. I know Cheryl gets up here every week, and I get up here and say, hey, we're really glad you're here. Thanks for being here. And I often wonder if some people are like, do you really, really care that I'm here? And we actually really do care that you're here and that you made a choice to be here. And we care that you actually got up and brushed your teeth and put some clothes on, and we're particularly happy about that. But glad that you're here on Sunday and that you decided to make church a priority today and at least make it something that you did today. And so I want to spend a little bit of time talking about that, this church is full of so many talented people. I loved our worship this morning, and I love the job they do. And I tell you something else, just a couple other people I wanted to recognize this morning. We had, I don't know if you've been in town to the theater. Anybody go see Joseph and the Technicolor? A few people went and saw that this week. We have two of our very own that are in that play. Our very own Pastor Mark is playing Jacob in that play. And then I think Janet Broom, who sings on our praise team as well, she's in that as well. So if you get a chance, I haven't got a chance to go see it yet, but I plan on making it. I think it's next weekend too. So just wanted to recognize them. It's cool to see members of our church engaged in our community, and that's really what church should be about. So, but I am glad that you're here, and I'm really glad that you decided to come to church this morning. And this morning, typically around this time of year, for some of you who don't know, our Church of the Nazarene in our church, our fiscal year runs from the end of April and starts over in May. So we've just really turned over a new year for our church in May. And typically around this time of the year, we like to kind of reflect back and look back on the year that we had. And kind of share some of that with you this morning, and so if you're new here, bear with us a little bit this morning. If this is your first time visiting, you're going to get to know a bunch of stuff about Salem Grace this morning that probably you didn't even care to know. But we want to share a little bit of that stuff with you. Not going to spend a ton of time on that, but one of the things that we strive to do. I know we just took offering, and there's this concept about offering that, well, you don't talk about it, churches, and I think we're hypersensitive to it as a church because we think, well, people that are sitting in our congregation are like, oh, all they want to do is talk about offering, and they want my money, and that's all they care about, and that can be the furthest thing for the truth. But it does take money to make this place run. There's a lot of, we want to be responsible stewards with the tithe and offering that you guys put in the plate or online or through our app. And so one of the things that we want to do about this time of year is we want to just kind of share an overall picture of our finances at church. And I think where is he? Kyle, are you here? There he is. He moved on me. He was a different place in the first service. But he's going to bring some help with him. That's awesome. This is Kyle Gansauer. This is Kinsley. She's our assistant treasurer, the church. And so, does a good job. Kyle is our church treasurer, Kyle Gansauer. And Kyle does a fantastic job managing our finances, and we work with we do have a finance team that we work with in addition to the board, but Kyle is our treasurer. And so I asked Kyle just to come and just give some highlights of last year financially and where we're at as a church. And so Kyle, I'll give you a few minutes. Thanks.
Good morning. As Trent mentioned, so everything that we'll put up on the slides would be from May 1st of 2016 through April 30th of 2017. So we're 1 month into the new year, but we just put some high-level information together. So for the prior year, our operating expenses exceeded our tithes and offerings by $21,000. So simple terms, that was a loss. We were in the red slightly. We're going to give a little more context to that as we move on. One of the components of our expenses, we have church tithe, this is what we call it, and it's being affiliated with the Nazarene Church. We tithe 1% to the World Evangelism Fund, which is global missions, pensions and benefits for retired pastors, Olivet, which is the District Bible College, and then the Illinois District, which covers a geographic region of Nazarene churches. So in our total expenses, we paid $99,000 to that this year, which is a big number, but again, it's our faithful tithe, just as we are called to be faithful. We also spend a significant amount of money locally, and it ranges. I could go into a lot of detail, but so $36,000 was put back into our congregation and our community, ranging from the food pantry, the bread and fish fund is a big component. Pastor Trent mentions flowers when we have our loved ones in the hospital, funeral dinners, the list goes on, but that is a significant component of our spending, and that totaled $36,000. And then again, when you look at the fact we finished in the red, I just wanted to note, we put $32,000 back into the building itself, through the HVAC. You may notice the airflow, the parking lot, landscape, and then we save for future expenditures, knowing those are going to arise. So we have a monthly expense where we transfer money and save that for future items that may arise that we've not planned for. Last year, we had a $22,000 increase from the prior year, and so for those of you like percentages, that's about a 3.4% increase, which is good. A little below the prior year increase, if you remember the presentation from last year, but still good. We reduced our building debt by $23,000, so we owe the bank $35,000 on this facility. That's the only debt the church currently has on the books, and we are scheduled to pay that off in 14 to 15 months if we stay on schedule, which is positive. We finished the year with $164,000 in the bank. That's total cash. And then the next slide, it's important to note, I think, you look at that number, we do have money that's been restricted for certain expenditures. I already mentioned the building, the big stuff deposits, so that 164 could potentially be a little high. So the church has $37,000 of unrestricted operating cash, and that's pretty stable from the last year I look back, actually the past two, so very stable on that front. And I think that may be the last slide. Is that it? Okay.
All right. Yep. Thank you, Kyle. Yeah, so that's not something you come to church and hear every Sunday. We don't do that every Sunday, so if you're new here, this is just, you caught us on a Sunday that we're sharing some of this information. But we want to be completely transparent. I will tell you also that Kyle has offered to hold separate. We can schedule a separate meeting outside of Sunday morning, and if some of you are interested in knowing a little bit more or getting a little bit further into the weeds, Kyle has offered to teach that and walk through anyone that has further questions about our finances. But the goal here is for us to be completely transparent. It does take some money to run this place and do the type of ministries that we're trying to do to reach people for Jesus. And so it's just kind of a necessary part. The other thing I wanted to share with you this morning is just it's hard when you're pastoring your church or running a church of this size, and it's hard to measure your success and trying to understand. And one of the ways that we're sometimes guilty of doing is just by attendance. And we look at the attendance on the wall and go, well, we had that attendance was great. And we've had some great attendances here. We've had different services where we've had, I think our record here was like 980 or 96. I'm like, seriously, we couldn't get 4 more people in the door, but 1,000, seriously, but we've had some Sundays like that. We've had typically our average attendance is around 550 to 580 range. Typically is where we average, bumping around that. Lately we've been bumping around the 600 number here at Salem Grace. But just some other information that beyond just attendance that I wanted to share, and this is also something that's difficult to gauge, is the number of conversions, and that's really what we're concerned about. We're really concerned about, are we making a difference in people's lives? Are people finding, are coming into a walk with Jesus Christ? Are they developing a deeper relationship with Christ? And is that applying in their life? And so just numbers that we're able to track, I'm sure it's more than this, but we had 43 new conversions last year from May to May, and that represented in 43 baptisms. We baptized 43 people in the past year, which is awesome. I think that's awesome. We took in 30 new members, and I think the conversions are probably more than that, because I see people's hands raised at the end of the service, and you may too if you're a peeker and you look. If you're one of those people that look around, every head bowed, and you're like this. But anyway, we took in 30 new members. We celebrated communion together 12 times. We had, and speaking of baptisms, let me back up. We're going to do baptisms next Sunday too. So if you're in a spot in your walk with Christ and you've made the decision to follow Christ, but you've never really been baptized, or maybe you baptized as a kid and you really didn't know the significance of it, we'd encourage you to do that. Find one of us. It's not too late. We'll get you dunked next Sunday, and we'll add you to that. But we minister. We've provided, we have 17 active current growing grow groups that are meeting on a regular basis. We've restructured our mission teams this year. We have countless local domestic projects that we're doing. We've made improvements to our facility. We had, as Kyle mentioned, we have a new air conditioning facility, which was a big expense to keep us cool in here this summer instead of dying like we did last summer. Added a new north entrance. We've done some landscaping. We're doing some things to improve on our facility here, and we want to continue to do that and take care of what God has given us. On a ministry level, we minister to approximately, and I've shared this number with you before, but we minister to approximately 250 to 280 school-age students every week through the course of our year. We average around 180 at Youth Loop, which is our high school ministry on Wednesday nights, 160 maybe on a Wednesday night, and then we have a good group of junior high kids that meet on Sunday night. We have Grace Extreme on Sunday night that meets with our kids and all that. And so we're doing a lot of great things. And one of the things that I just wanted to share, God has continued to bless us. We've got things going on. We probably have 160 some kids going to big stuff. What? 154 going to big stuff. We got 154 going to big stuff this year. Our high school students that have committed to go to big stuff. We've got day camp coming up. We have a carnival that we talked about. Lots of things happening around this place, and I just wanted you to know about some of that stuff in addition to some of the financial stuff. But, it's interesting because church, all of that together we've accomplished. It's not something I've accomplished. It's not something the staff has accomplished. We as a body of believers and the faithfulness of givers and the faithfulness of people to volunteer their time is what helps us do those types of ministries. And we have people right now that are taking care of your kids in the back. We brought them in. I love to see them here in worship, and they take communion with us, and I love that part of our church. But it takes a virtual army, and I tell people that all the time. When you have a church of this size, it takes a virtual army of volunteers, people who volunteer in Crave and Grace Extreme and Junior High and our missions team and our benevolence team, and we have a home group, and we have a candy cane project, and all these things that are just because we as a body of believers are invested in this place. And so this morning I want to take the time that I have left, and I'm going to try to watch it, but the time I have left this morning, I want to just share to continue on the theme of our church, and I titled my message today, Me, Myself, and My Church, or Me, My Church, and I, actually is what it says on the front of you. I forgot what I titled my message. Me, my church, and I, right? So really what I want you to think about is what does church mean to you personally? What is it? What's been your experiences? And if I think about, church is just kind of a funny thing, right? When you think about it, because we all come here and we get in our cars and we get our clothes on and we come to church and we sit here and we listen to some guy talk and we sing some songs and we put some money in a plate and we maybe take communion and we go through some of these rituals that we have as a church. But we've all had, what's interesting is this body, even this 11 o'clock service, is a melting pot of different experiences. Each one of you sitting here have had some kind of a different experience when it comes to church. Maybe a lot of those have been good. I don't know if you're like me. I was born and raised. I was born on a Wednesday, and I think my mom, she took me to church that night, right, Mom? I was in church, maybe not, maybe next Wednesday, but I was in church. We were in church. It was a priority for our family, and we went. And some of the memories I have about church was Mom would dress us like, and you've heard my story about my itchy pants. She would lay the itchy pants on, and we'd get out of the bathroom and go, oh, not the itchy pants. We've got to wear the itchy pants tonight. And I hated wearing the itchy pants to church. And I did all those things, and we went to for some of you older people, you might remember Revival. You ever remember Revival? You have to go to Revival when you were a kid, and when I was a kid. So count your blessings. Like when I was a kid, it started on Sunday and it went all the way to next Sunday and maybe even beyond. And they were like, man, I wish we could go another week. And I'm like, no. I just remember just sitting in church and being bored to tears and going, man, I get nothing out of this. Or just, getting on the church bus and having to go to a missionary zone rally at some other church and you just, on this church, the guy could never find the gears. It was drive the church bus and you smelled like gas and you went and watched slideshows of Africans and they were always upside down. And is that a water buffalo? That was some of my experiences at church, but we've all had different experiences at church, and some of you have had similar experiences and you can relate to mine, but some of you maybe church wasn't a priority for you growing up, and maybe you had a different church or you're raised in a different religion, but in this congregation this morning, we have a melting pot of past experiences. We have expectations about what church should be like when we come. We have frustrations, disappointment, and a million other feelings about what church should be. And for some of us, church is an integral part of my life. I'm thankful for two parents that made it a priority for me to go to church. It changed who I am. It shaped who I am as a person. For some of us, we just go on Sunday morning to say we went, and we check the box. Some of us come because we didn't have a choice, and we were forced to be here, and we were drugged to church maybe as a kid, and we resented that, and we don't want to go anymore, and it is what it is. We get nothing out of it. Some of us are invested in this place. We've actually given money. We're volunteering in worship. We're volunteering time in serving the youth or playing an instrument or doing something, and you're vested in this place and you care about it. Some of you are new to church. Some of you are brand new, or maybe it's the first time you've been back to church in a long time, and you're like, man, I don't even know I really get all this. And you have ideas of what you've heard about church and what you see about Christians on social media, and sometimes that doesn't necessarily reflect who we really are as people or as believers or bodies of Christ. So I say all that to just share with some things. We talked about the past 4 weeks, we talked about God's divine direction and looking for divine direction for our church. I was doing some research this week, and church attendance is fascinating to me, like why you guys come. What motivates you to be here this morning? And I was looking at that, and what really what I'm more interested in are the people who aren't here. Like, what do we need to do as a church, as a body of believers, to connect with people who aren't here, that don't see the value in church and don't get it? So I've been reading this book, and it's called The Rise of the Nuns. And no, it's not N-U-N. I'm not talking about Catholic nuns. They're not uprising. Nuns are going to take over. Look out. It's not that. It's nuns, N-O-N-E-S. It's the rise of the nuns. And what it is it's a rise of people in our generation who say they have zero affiliation with religion. Like they would claim, when you're checking the box, are you Baptist, are you Nazarene, are you Protestant, are you Catholic, or are you none? We're seeing a rise in people who are checking the box of none. They really just aren't they're not making a connection with anything. And this group neither cares to practice religion, nor do they oppose it. They just are simply not invested in it in either way. And their motto is, it really just doesn't matter much. And I get that. I understand that. Because I'm not sure as a church we've really shown people the value of what it means to be a part of a body of believers and a body of Christ. I also read this week, which was interesting. There are 10 top reasons that regular attenders are coming less frequently. And what's interesting to me is just we watch the numbers here because I watch the attendance. And what's amazing to me is we will have a couple of Sundays ago, we had 590. And then the very next Sunday, we had 430. 150 of you, where do you go? You guys all call each other and go, okay, we're not going. You going? No, I'm not going. I'm hanging it up. We're not going. I don't want to hear anymore. But has anybody ever had a bad experience at church? Anybody? Yeah, some of you? Yeah, some of you are like, yes, I'm having one right now. Please, God, let him shut up and so I can get out of here. But here are the top 10 reasons that regular attenders are coming less frequently, and I found this interesting. Number one, greater affluence, meaning we're making more money, we have more options, and we can do different things. Number 2, kids' activities. Parents are choosing sports or other activities over regular attendance to church. I'm not trying to guilt anybody, just so you know. It is what it is. It's just part of our culture. More travel's up the other right. Blended families. We have more blended families today than we've ever had in the history of America. Where you have, it's very rare that we have, actually probably I would go to say that we're a minority as a culture where kids have 2 parents that are married living in the same household. Most of our kids now are coming from blended families. Parents are divorced, mom and dad have remarried. I got to spend this weekend with mom and this weekend with dad, and that affects our church attendance. Online options. People have options online. I talked about that a couple weeks ago, about the options that we have. Cultural disappearance of guilt. At one point in time, as a culture, you were shamed or guilted for not coming to church. And we've seen that disappear. There's a cultural disappearance of guilt, which honestly I'm okay with, because I really don't want you being here if you're just coming out of guilt. Okay? Self-directed spirituality, meaning we self-direct or we think we can do it on our own. Let me ask you this. Has anybody ever had like a weird rash? Like you just wake up and there's this weird rash and it's itchy and it's kind of inflamed, and the thing that you would like to do is like, hey, can you look at that? You know, but what happens when you have something like that? What's the first thing you do? Like something weird happens medically to you, what do? Google. We do, right? I heard it. We're like, we go to Google. I'm gonna self-diagnose. Oh my gosh, I'm dying. You know, and people are doing that spiritually. They're spiritually self-directed. They think they can get on the internet and read a devotion or do whatever and be good, and we don't need church. And number 8 is failure to see a direct benefit. Number 9 is valuing attendance over engagement, which is sometimes guilty as a staff. We value your attendance over your engagement in a place. Meaning we're just happy if you show up, not necessarily happy if you're actually engaged and connected to church. Okay? And then the number 10 is a massive culture shift. So, with all that said, in our culture and where we are with church, and I don't know if you guys think about this, I lay awake at night thinking about this stuff. I know you guys don't, but it's interesting to me. So, I'm having fun, so just listen. Here's the deal. I wanted to talk to you about what the church was meant to be, and what it should be, and the way it should feel. And I think there's this concept. Anybody know what today is? Spiritual significance of today? Anybody? What? It's Pentecost Sunday. I heard it. Somebody knows. It's Pentecost Sunday. Ding, ding, ding. Yes, please see Got Questions table for your free gift. No. Pentecost Sunday. And so if you read in the Bible, there's this thing called Pentecost Sunday, and what happened was that all these people from different nations were gathered. The Holy Spirit came. Everybody heard the gospel in their own language. It was an amazing event. The Holy Spirit came, and then 3,000 people were saved that day. And then from that 3,000 people, it just spread. And that's when it's really considered, Pentecost Sunday today is considered the birth of the church, of what we see today. So from that time, people started meeting in little homes and started gathering together, and they started sharing different things with it. And I think here's what Acts says they did. In Acts chapter 2, verse 44, here's what happened. Here's what the first church looked like. And all the believers met together in one place, and they shared everything they had. They sold their property. This sounds fun, so listen to this. They sold their property and possessions, and they shared the money with those in need. They worshiped together at the temple. How many days did they worship? Every day. We're doing church every day from now on. No. Worship at the temple each day. They met at homes at the Lord's Supper, and they shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of the people. And each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. And I get it. I hear people. I get this all the time. I hear this a lot. Hey, church isn't perfect. How many of you have ever heard somebody say, well, that church is just a bunch of hypocrites? Anybody ever heard that? Okay, yeah. Come up with a new line. We know. We're messed up. There's room for one more. Come on. Life is complex. There's growing options. If you really want to know what church is like, and you think, well, I've heard people say this, well, I got to get to a more biblical church. Well, if you don't want to get to a more biblical church, then here's what we got to start doing. We got to start meeting every day before dawn, before the sun comes up. You get up, the sun rises, we pray together as Christians. We pool all of our possessions. We don't claim anything as our own. We're willing to lose our job, our home, our family, and even our life to follow Jesus Christ. That's what the first church looked like. I'm not saying we have to do that necessarily. I think God's calling us necessarily to do all that. But you cannot disassociate from church as a Christian any more than you can disassociate from humanity as a person. Ephesians 3:10-11 says this: God's purpose in all this was to use the church to display wisdom in its rich variety to all the unseen rulers and authorities in heavenly places. This was his eternal plan, which he carried out through Jesus Christ. You see, the church was not a human idea. It was Jesus's, and it was God's. He meant for us to gather together. You can read half of the New Testament with one eye closed, and you're going to still see the undeniable conclusion that church was God's idea. It wasn't ours. In fact, the New Testament is not about the teaching of Jesus. It's really about the work of church. You want to see a messed up church? Start reading Corinthians. There's like 12 different things that they were messed up on. Paul spent he had to write 2 books to talk about all the issues they had in church. I won't take the time to list it, but if you want to get rid of church, you also need to get rid of Jesus. You can't have one without the other. You get that? Let me say that again. You might want to write this down. If you want to get rid of the church, you also need to get rid of Jesus, because you can't have one without the other. He created it. Second thing. So the first thing is that's kind of the history, the invention of the church. Second thing I want to share with you real quick. Consumers versus doers. We have the uncanny ability to be the ultimate consumers as America. And because we live in an age where we have so many options, we can simply choose to move on. And that's exactly what happens. Well, we become these ultimate consumers. I see it all the time. People criticize the church as being consumeristic, and really that's probably a fair criticism. Because often church becomes about me. Well, I didn't like the way he said that. Okay. Well, it was too dark, or the music was too loud, or it smelled funny, or I didn't like the people sitting next to me, or whatever it is, it becomes about, am I happy? Am I happy in this building called church? It becomes about me. And let me tell you, what's my saying? Salem Grace, it's not about us. It is not about how happy we are sitting in this building. It's about what we are doing outside of this place, and the church is who we are. It's not a place where we go. Our bodies become the tabernacle. It says our bodies are the temple of Christ. We need to be the church everywhere we walk. It's not about me. We cater to consumerism. And we're often guilty. Sometimes I catch myself, I'm often guilty of that. I was like, well, I'll be writing a sermon and I'll be like, man, should I say it that way? Because, man, that might offend somebody. You know what? Sin is still sin. And I'm going to call it what it is. And sometimes as churches, we don't want to upset the apple cart because it might offend somebody and they might leave and hurt our attendance. You know what? I don't care enough so much about our attendance. I care about how each one of you are growing in your relationship with Jesus Christ. And I care enough to tell you the truth and tell you that some of you are living in sin and making choices that you're going to regret someday. The Bible teaches it. It's not Trent's idea. Consumerism can push you away from the church, and you think you can do church by yourself. And let me tell you, you think you can go and listen to a podcast or a video or watch a thing online and put your earbuds in and listen to your favorite worship sermon, your worship songs, and sit on your back deck and drink a cup of coffee or sit in a tree stand or on a boat fishing. And I get that. Trust me. I've had those moments like that when I feel God and I feel God's presence in my life, and you can do those things, and God talks to us in those. But let me tell you something. Disconnecting yourself from a community is actually less faithful than connecting yourself to a flawed community. You want to come here, and we want to, a tendency is for us to sit here and go, well, I'm not going there with those people. They're a bunch of, they take money and they spend it. And I know that guy who sits up there and takes the offering. I saw him doing this last weekend. And you know what? We're all messed up, people. We are all a bunch of sinners saved by grace. I love that song that we sang, because all we sinners sang, you know what? I'm not better than any one of you. We're all sinners saved by the love and the grace of our Heavenly Father. So come in here, bring all your junk, and tag along and sit it right next to the pew next to my junk, and we'll have church. James 1:22 says this, but don't just listen to God's word. You must do what it says. Otherwise, you are only fooling yourselves. We have to be doers of the word. At our church, and this is true. Cheryl and I talk about this a lot, and I'm not making this up, and I'm not saying this to make anybody feel guilty, but this is the God's honest truth. I see it in our own church, and I see it, and you can read about it. In the books that I read, it says the same things, but it says this. At our church, this is true, pay attention to this, I find that the most engaged people who serve, give, and invite into a community are the most frequent attenders. So in other words, the people that I see that are growing in their faith and walking with God and getting a little bit stronger, and he's doing things in their life and he's using them in ways that he never thought they could, and they're putting offering in that they can't afford to put in, and God's blessing them and they're getting stuff that they can't explain. The people I see that's working are people who are committed and are serving and are plugging into this community. You want to experience God like you've never experienced him? Start serving him in a way like you've never done before. Sacrificially, doing stuff when you don't feel like it, doing stuff when you don't have time, paying money when you don't have the money and you don't know where it's going to come from, but you're going to put your offering and you're going to be faithful in that way. And it's not about your offering. I'm trusting it. It's not about me getting your offering. It's about you getting a blessing from God. Our church, we find, it's interesting. Anybody have a graduation party Cole went to graduation. Last Sunday I went to like 5 graduation parties. That's what happens when you have 150 kids in your youth group. Went to a bunch of graduation parties, went to one yesterday, and you go in, and for me, going in, we go in, and anybody host a graduation party for your, okay, some of you? I've often likened church to a party. For Cheryl and I, we just got a card and, whatever, and we stop by and say, hey, and they say, well, I was really glad you're here. Got a picture with Cole, and said, hey, I'm glad you're here, man, and thanks for coming. But for the people that are hosting the party, it's a different deal. You got to get the cake, you got to get cookies, you got to make sure the food's there, you got to make sure your guests are greeted, I think for church it's kind of like that. The party takes on a whole different meaning when you're hosting the party, and you're part of it, and you're invested in the party, as opposed to just coming in and sitting in a pew and going to the party. So are you going to be a part of the party, or are you just going to come to the party? You make that decision. Last thing, I know I got to hurry. I'm going to ask the band to come up. I'm going to spend a lot of time, but 1 Corinthians 1:10 says this, I appeal to you, dear brothers and sisters, by the authority of the Lord Jesus Christ, to live in harmony with each other. Let there be no divisions in the church. Rather be of one mind, united in thought and purpose. Is church perfect? Absolutely not. Living in community with people, is that fun all the time? No. Some of you people annoy me to death. No, just kidding. People drive me crazy sometimes. We drive each other crazy sometimes, right? We do stuff, we say things, we're real people. And to expect that 600 people are going to lock arms and go whistling Dixie and always be on the same page is crazy. It's messy. You know why? Because we're sinners. We have junk in our lives. We have temptations that we wrestle with. I'm no different, the same way. I don't always make the right decision as your pastor. Woo! You're like, yeah, we knew that one. Here's the thing, if you look at the New Testament, it's not a story really of an idealized church. If you read all through the New Testament and read Corinthians and Philippians and all these they're different churches. They're messed up churches. It's really just a story of how Jesus is using his followers to spread his love despite themselves. Isn't that awesome? That despite our junk and despite how messed up people we are, God can still use us. And that to me is crazy. It blows my mind that God would take a banker and say, hey, you're going to be a pastor. I'm like, I don't want to be a pastor. But when we're obedient and we allow God to use us despite our junk, the church can give the world a front row seat for the grace of God if we do it right. If we own our junk and we say, you know what, I'm messed up, but by the grace of God, I'm going to make it. I understand that the idea of the imperfect church makes some people nervous and kind of freak out. But rather than stressing us out, wouldn't it be cool that the fact that Jesus started the church with imperfect people should make us marvel at God's incredible grace to us? The idea that God would use me is amazing because he had other options. Surely there was a better option in Salem, Illinois than Trent Ice, but he chose to use me. It blows my mind. Are you kidding me, God? You got nothing better than this? That's the way I feel sometimes. And it's got to be the way some of you feel with all the junk that you've got going on. But I promise you, you will never experience Christ ever until you let him use you. Until he uses us collective as a body of believers. So what does the future hold for Salem Grace? I wish I could stand up here and say, okay. Matter of fact, we've been talking to different people to help us cast vision and all this stuff. I wish I could stand up here and put a PowerPoint presentation up here and say, okay, here's what we're going to accomplish in the next year and 5 years and 2 years. I can't tell you that. But what I can tell you, that if collectively as a body of believers, we allow God to use us, and we begin to step out of our comfort zone, and we begin to put money in that we don't have, and we begin to talk to people, invite people to church, and be the kind of people that we should be, and be the church outside of this wall and outside of these puffy blue pews, it'll be an amazing experience, and we won't have room to pack people in here because they'll want it. They'll want what you have, and that's a relationship with Jesus Christ. Stand with me this morning. Father, thank you so much for this church. God, help us not to see it just as a place or somewhere we go on Sunday and check the box. Help us to think about ourselves as the church. Me, my church, and I. How can I be the church to somebody around me this week? How can I be the church to somebody I work with? How can I be the church with the guy who's homeless? How can I be the church to people who don't want to even hear about the church? How can I be the church to a lost and hurt and dying world of people that are making destructive decisions in their life? God, help us to just put down our guard and to not let our baggage weigh us down, but help us to drag it along and know that you can use messed up people to serve you. Father, I'm so grateful that you chose to use me. That you chose to use what little I have to offer. God, take it this morning and use it for whatever you want to use it for. Lord, I just pray that you would go with us as we leave this place. Help Salem Grace to be Salem Grace to Salem. Help us to show people the grace of God in our lives, and help us to be compassionate and loving and kind and generous, outrageously generous people to others that we come in contact with. Thank you for what you've done for our church this far, God, and I pray that you will give us direction, that you'll continue to bless this place, not because of something that we've done, but all that you've done through us. God, we give you thanks for what's to come and what you have in store for this place. God, go with us this morning and lead us back here next week.